There's always a storm of thoughts, feelings, and ideas swirling in one's brain. Through the act of writing or storytelling, you try to express it on paper or screen or stage, and if you're lucky, the chaos becomes coherence. Something meaningful, something beautiful emerges. Human beings are hardwired for storytelling. American scholar Jonathan Gottschall suggested that the human race should be called not Homo sapiens but Homo fictus, meaning the storytelling animal. We make sense of our world through stories. A cave painting of animals and hunters from 30,000 years ago is ancient man telling the story of his life and trying to understand it through the telling. Today, cave walls have been replaced by social media walls and screens of various sizes. Cautionary tales such as Little Red Riding Hood are another example of learning through storytelling. The purpose of such a story is to make you aware that you should be wary of strangers. And the child who draws stick figures of himself and his family standing in front of his house is recreating his little world through a pictorial story. When you write a poem after a difficult breakup, you're trying to sort out your feelings by expressing them in this story in verse. And even when you plan for the future in your day to day lives, you're telling a story. The plan is the story of the future you desire.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Closet Writer Chronicles. I'm your host Sangeeta, aka the Moody Marshmallow. You just heard our guest for today, Sumanto Chattopadhyay. Sumanto is a creative consultant and the creator of the English Nut, a platform that highlights interesting facts about the English language. He is the former chairman and chief creative officer of 82.5 Communications Ogilvy Group, and he was the executive creative director of Ogilvy South Asia. He is also an actor and is currently in the process of writing his first book. Tune in to hear about Shumanto's journey. Hi everyone, welcome back to the Closet Writer Chronicles. This week I have with me Shumanto Chattopadhyay. Welcome to the show, Shumanto. It's so good to have you here.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be on your show, Sangeeta.
So, just, to kind of dive right in, I think the first thing I want to ask you is what is your earliest memory of being creative and when did you start writing?
Okay. So, when I was about 3 or 4 years old, we used to live in this old bungalow in Calcutta, which had those typical red oxide floors. And in the afternoons, and my mother gave me, I think that, my mother used to have a job. She used to teach in the mornings, and then she would come home and have lunch and then take a nap. And she didn't want me to disturb her, I think, at that time. So she gave me a box of chalk in different colors and said, you can draw on the floor. And so every afternoon I would cover my parents' entire bedroom floor with drawings. And when I got done with that floor, it would, my drawings would spill over onto the balcony, and I would just keep drawing. And then, our house at that time, the floors used to be wiped once in the morning, and then again at around 4:30 in the afternoon, they were swept and swabbed again. So basically, at 4:30, my drawings were wiped clean, and I got a fresh new canvas for the next day. So yeah, so I think creative uh, my creativity started with drawing on the floor with chalk. Writing came later, actually. uh, I was living in Arusha, Tanzania, with my parents at one point in time. I was in class 6 and 7 over there, and one of my teachers gave me a one-page story and asked me to develop it into a full-fledged play. uh,
Okay.
and I didn't hesitate. I hadn't learned self doubt yet, So my teachers asked me to write a play, so I'm sure I know, and I wrote it. And she said, "Great, and it was performed as the annual school play." And I didn't find that also to be something extraordinary, because I thought maybe, okay, this is the way it happens, and so it was performed. And then we were there for just 2 years, and I remember when I was leaving with my parents, my teacher dropped into our house and she said that I'll wait for you to publish your first play. And unfortunately, I've disappointed her because I haven't published any plays after that. But yeah, I think that that boost, and that that self confidence boost that I got, or just a teacher that you respect, sort of telling you that of course you can write this, and you don't even think that you can't, and you write it. So I think that's got what got me started on writing. uh, and it was very different once I came back to India, because academics were a lot tougher in India compared to other, because I've lived in the UK, I've lived in Africa, then later on in America, Canada, and in India somehow the system is such that you have to really study hard, and there's always this
Yeah.
stress. And I come from a family of academics, and so there was no, my parents would say no pressure, but your father's first class first, your grandfather was a gold medalist, and on and on and on. So you had, there was this tremendous pressure that you felt. And also coming back suddenly, not having studied Bengali abroad, and then coming back and having, so I would have to work really hard. So this, the creative part of life would kind of take a back seat. But I think this, uh, being in Tanzania and having this opportunity was fantastic. And earlier on, when I was 7, 8 years old, we were in Manchester, England. So I don't think that I wrote anything other than basic, half page, paragraphs and all. But even over there, I think I, when I went to England, I could, I was barely learning CAT, cat, BAT, bat. But when I went there and I was put in the school, at that age, kids pick up languages really fast, and
Yeah.
that's how I picked up English. And I remember that we had this series, this Ladybirds series, which and you read as per your level. So once you finished a book, you went on to the next book. And I remember at one point my teacher called my mother in and said that we don't have any more books. I know I'm showing off about my 8-year-old self, but so they were basically, I reached the top level and there were no more books in the series for me to read. So I think that I've always, so because I was thrown into this situation in England, so English language is something that I picked up at that point, and that's stood me in great stead ever since.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think we will come to, of course, the English nut, which I think is one of, I think is such an amazing venture that you've gotten yourself into. And we will come to that. But, I think one thing which you mentioned and which I found really interesting was the fact that since, you were moving around a lot. So I'm just curious then, like what your sort of relationship with, say, I guess, belonging to a place is in terms of, I guess, identity and culture, because I know a lot of people who have moved around a lot while growing up, and there's sort of like this third culture kid situation in terms of kind of figuring out, oh, like, I identify with this but I also identify with that. So what was, I guess, identity like for
Yeah,
you?
very much so. I mean, I can totally relate to what you're saying and what you're asking me, because see, at one level, I come from this Bengali family who's the typical very proud of being Bengali family, with the Tagore connections and all of that, and grew up with that. And the school that I went to in Calcutta had a great stress on Bengali culture and all of that. So that was very much a part of my identity. Calcutta was very much a part of my identity. But I also, because I went abroad, my father took jobs in different countries, so I think those, being in those places, when you're away, see, when you're in a place where you're just like everybody else, it's one thing. But then when you suddenly go, I remember later on, especially when I went to the US, I really felt like I was an ambassador for India. Nobody asked me to be, but I felt that everything that I did, would people would judge what India is like or what Indian culture is like based on my behavior. So that's a pressure that I put on myself. But yeah, I mean, also, like I said, being in England, By the way, I was also born in the UK. I was born in Swansea, Wales, but
Oh,
I was
okay.
just, I think I was a month old when my parents came back from that trip. But yeah, so later on we went to Manchester and, as I said, Arusha, and then I went to the US and Canada and all of that. So I think that being in those places does give you a completely different perspective, because it's not, I think when you're in, if you live in one place all your life, everybody has pretty much the same set of beliefs, and you look you be I mean, of course there are differences, but you do things, everybody does things in a particular way. Your lifestyle is dictated by the way that city is, and the way the arrangements are, what the public transport system, even basic things like that. So I think that, a simple thing like when you live in, say, when you're studying in the US as an adult, you have to wash your own dishes, and you have to clean your own house, and these are things, particularly for Indians, we are really spoiled, when, because we have people do these things for us. So it gives you a different perspective, and then there's dignity of labor in those countries. I mean, somebody, just
Yeah.
because somebody is working as a janitor does not mean that they are lesser,
Yeah.
somebody who's working in a, I don't know, in an academic job or whatever. The other interesting thing that I want to talk about in this context is that, I went to a college called Berea College in Kentucky for my bachelor's
Okay.
degree, and it was a work study program, which meant that, so my parents didn't, they didn't have to pay for my education at all, in the sense that they just had to buy me a ticket, and there was a deposit that had to be paid. uh, all students on that campus had to work a minimum between 10 and 20 hours, but in exchange, and they used to give you a small, amount per hour that you worked, which was like pocket money. But in exchange for working on campus, everything was free, like your board and your food and lodging and, tuition, as they call it, everything was paid for, so that it was quite amazing, actually. And so, as a part of this program, I did different jobs. When I went there, I started out as a waiter, because the college had, it was quite a historical campus, and there was this very old hotel called the Boone Tavern, and I worked as a waiter in the restaurant over there, to learn how to carry trays of food, how to take orders, how to serve,
Wow.
and describe the items on the menu. And then I did other jobs. I worked as a tour guide of the campus, where the most important thing in that was that you had to, it was a walking tour, and I had to walk backwards with people, following me from the front. And but anyway, and I did all sorts of other jobs as well. I was a teacher's assistant and so on. But the one of the big tenets of that institution was that all labor has dignity. So people did all sorts of jobs. Like I was doing some people also did janitorial jobs, but everybody was equal in all jobs. So I think the perspective like that is not something you would get in India typically.
Hmm. No, I completely agree. And I really liked your sort of take on that, in terms of what your experience was like. But, kind of moving, I guess, to your educational background, which again is very interesting because, you studied economics, you studied math, and then you got an MBA.
Yeah.
How did, how did each of those choices happen for you? Because I mean, usually I think people are struggling in terms of, okay, let's just get one degree and, okay, maybe a master's, get done with it, and then start working. You got like three full-fledged degrees here, and they're not exactly, they're also, I guess, considered more laborious in terms of, like, I guess, certain other subjects. So how did each of, these choices happen for you, and how do you think they've contributed to where you are today?
Well, I already told you how, there was this stress on academics and our family. And the other thing was, I really didn't know what I wanted to do.
Okay.
So, uh, when I one of the things was, I actually used to struggle with math in school. And my and so when, we, as per the system that I was under, in the 11th standard, your number of subjects reduced, so you could choose a stream. And I wanted to give up
Right.
mathematics, and my father said, no, no, don't give up mathematics. So I didn't want to do the sciences. So the in between was the eco math stats, as it was called. So economics, mathematics, statistics. And then I applied for this Berea College in the US, and I went off over there. And I'd already been studying these subjects, so that's what I told them I wanted to study. And my father was very happy. And it's not like I was I was not one of those youngsters who was very sure that they wanted to study a particular thing and then get a particular kind of job. And I also think that at that nowadays there are a lot more opportunities available. There are all
Yeah.
kinds of jobs that are available in India today, for example, which were not there, at that time. So my father was obviously looking out for my future, and he said, go with these safe options. So I just kind of drifted into economics and mathematics, and uh, and I completed my degree. And while I was doing this, one of the universities came to recruit students into their mathematics department, and I was actually doing well in mathematics there versus what I was doing
Okay.
in it. So my math teacher wanted me to, you know, get a master's in math. So I got into this program at Clemson University. It was applied mathematics program. And it was actually it was hard, but it was quite interesting as well. And one of the things that I started doing there, I actually started teaching probability 101.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, and I would be that was also quite an experience, because I would be teaching these students who, some of them were like football players, so they were like, much.
Wow.
And I was so scared. I was so nervous because I'd never taught before, and I was teaching this room full of people who were many of whom were double my size. And I have to tell you, I mean, this is an aside, but I had an experience there which was quite a sort of a life changing, or let's say it was a lesson learned for me, which was that, so there was so when I started in the first semester, in the first probability class that I was teaching, I was not able to control the class. So everybody was like, talking and doing this and throwing things at each other, and there was this one guy who was who kind of was the ringleader,
Okay.
and he was, I think, a football player. And this was going on, and I felt that if this is what I'm not going to be able to sustain this, because it was nerve wracking for me to teach it. So one day I decided, and I was having sleepless nights over this, and one night I said, no, I'm going to talk to this guy. And and can you imagine, I was the teacher, but I was actually so scared to go up to him and tell him that, could you please stay back after class today? So he looked really surprised, but he stayed back. And I told him that, look, this is the first time I'm teaching, and I'm really trying my best. Maybe I'm not doing a great job, I don't know, but you're not helping me what you're doing. And I'm requesting you to, kind of help me out over here. And that was a turning point in my life, because from the next
Okay.
day, not only did he stop misbehaving, if anybody else in class misbehaved, he would like act like the class monitor, and he was this huge guy, so people would see. And then he'd look back at me and, like, with that look, like, see. And so and then after that, I really started enjoying teaching, and it was smooth sailing there on. So
That's amazing.
that was quite an experience. So anyway, so after I did, so I finished my master's in mathematics. And in fact, my professor there, because we had to do a paper as a part of even a master's degree, like a thesis, and he said, we want you to stay back for a PhD. So I said,
Okay. Wow.
so by then I decided that I don't want to make a career in mathematics.
Okay.
And then, by the way, my father was a professor at the Indian Institute of Management in Kolkata. So, management, MBA was another big thing. Or both my brothers had MBA, though both of them went into teaching late. Both of them got PhDs and went into teaching. So,
Oh,
but
wow.
anyway, so I said, okay, let me do an MBA. So I applied, and I did it. Got into this MBA program. Uh, and I think that while being in the creative department of an ad agency doesn't have much to do with these, but I would say there are certain connections. So one of the things is that having an MBA helped me connect with clients, because many of my the marketing people, on the other side in the client companies had MBA, so I could talk their language, which I think was an advantage
Yeah.
that I had. And I think economics is something which just gives you practical knowledge of the world, because it's how you're, when there's a recession happening, you know what's going on,
Yeah.
versus if you had no background in that subject. And mathematics actually is a very creative subject, in a very different way. And of course, once you get past the basics that we learn, and there's a lot of learning by rote that happens, and but it's more about the theory and the concepts. Once you get into the concepts part of it, it's something really creative. So yeah, so that's what my educational background is very different from the career that I ended up doing. But I just think that it's made me who I am. I mean, it's made me a multifaceted person.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think that's really interesting. In fact, I remember watching this TED talk by Emily Wapnick, and she speaks about multipotentialites, which are basically, individuals who have more than one interest, and they kind of end up merging multiple interests and kind of pursuing careers,
Yeah.
which kind of merges them, or pursuing different interests or two three streams altogether. So it's really fascinating to kind of just hear people talk about that, right, in real life. But also, I mean, to be fair, I studied like finance and I'm in publishing now.
Oh,
So
so we're alike in that way.
yeah. So, I mean, I think I can relate when, people say that, oh, I studied something, but I'm doing something completely unrelated, completely empathize there. But yeah, having said that, you did, like you said, you got into advertising, which is like, again, a completely different stream as, opposed to what you did study. Of course, it did combine the things you studied, but then how did you kind of decide to get into advertising?
So, one of the courses that we had in the MBA was on advertising. And
Hmm.
in that course, they used to actually show us lots of TV commercials, and a lot of them were fun to watch. And I thought maybe it would be fun making these things as well, and working on them. So that's what aroused my interest in advertising. And then there was the French government had sponsored the slogan contest, which like they had one of the institutions they'd approached was McGill, where I was studying. So I saw this on a notice board. So I wrote a slogan and it won.
Oh,
So
wow. Okay.
yeah, so I thought, I mean, I knew vaguely that writing slogans was one of the things I'd have to do in an ad agency. And so these were the two of the things that made me consider advertising. And also I so the other thing is that I finished my MBA and I decided I'm going to come back to India. I'm going to come back to Calcutta, my home. And I came back and I actually had I met some people who were in advertising, and I found that their approach to life, the way they dressed, they didn't wear like formals and things like that, and I thought this is cool. So I think that also influenced me. So all of these things combined kind of I think and and I had a flair for writing, because when I was doing the MBA, we had to do a lot of group projects, and I hated doing the research part of it and all that. So I would say that, look, I'll write the paper for you, but you guys do the research. And initially, it was that prejudice. I was thinking that, an Indian guy is going to be writing the paper, and here we the rest of us, our first language is English. But then after they saw what the way I was writing the first paper, they said they were happy to let me do it from then on. And even before that, when I was doing the my bachelor's degree at Berea College, I had there was a college paper, sort of a weekly paper that used to come out, and I wrote a few things for that. That's when I actually first realized that I can write stuff like this, which can get published. You know,
Okay.
so yeah, so I did. I mean, I just wrote some columns for them, and so yeah, so that those columns, as well as writing the papers in the MBA, and then the slogan contest, and the fact that I enjoyed the ads which I saw in the advertising class, all of these things kind of combined to push me to apply to an ad agency for my first job.
Yeah, and you've worked in advertising for about 30 years, which is insane. Uh, how has that phase been like for you? I mean, 30 years in advertising. I mean, you must have really seen the space evolve as well, but I'm just curious what it's been like for
No, so
you.
it's really changed a lot because I mean, print was such a big thing when I joined. Of course, TV was big and it was getting bigger, but newspapers and magazines and so print advertising was huge, and there was no digital. Radio was also good, and then FM started, and FM became like a big thing. I think in the last few years, things have changed dramatically again because, with the rise of digital and print going into decline, I think things have changed a lot. And also, this whole thing of artificial intelligence and machine learning, and, people are constantly talking about the fact that it's going to be technology and data which are going to start. Basically, they're going to be these robots replacing creative people like me.
Yeah.
So I like to think that it's not exactly going to be like that. I would like to think that uh, human creativity is always going to play a role, but it's going to be one of the things which, along with what machine learning can offer you, what artificial intelligence can offer you, and what this ocean of data that we have at our fingertips can offer you, all of these things are going to combine with the creativity of a human being. Of course, there are going to be ads that are going to be churned out without any I believe that already there are certain articles which are written online which are written by bots. So
Yeah.
uh, and so I'm sure there are ads being written by bots as well, and that is going to increase. But I think that to create something, a piece that's really and truly quote unquote creative, maybe that human uh, uh, element has to be there still. So we're not going to become totally redundant.
But then, what were your, I guess, favorite ads? I guess not even just when you were working, but even growing up. Because I know while growing up, I missed the ads from the 90s and, early 2000s. But even like, what were ads that you loved growing up? And what are some of the stuff that you worked on, which you loved and you're proud of when you look back and say, oh, that was a really cool project I worked on?
Well, first, let me talk about an ad which, when I was new in advertising, there was this ad for Raymond's, which had, the Raymond's Complete Man series. It had Rahul Bose in it, and it was about this guy who probably left Bombay to go somewhere else, and he's come back and he's looking for his friend, and he just can't find. So the whole film is the search for his friend, and then he realizes at the end, we realize he finds his friend's house, and they're not very well to do and all that. He sees the mother at the door, and then he realizes that his friend has become wheelchair bound, and so that's why he did not want to meet him. And so it ends with this really upbeat kind of a scene where he's you know I don't know whether it's on Chowpatty or somewhere, but he's pushing his friend along in the wheelchair, and they're just having a wonderful time together. So all of this didn't matter, and the years that they were apart didn't matter. The fact that this guy had lost the ability to walk didn't matter, and it was the friendship and that's what made him a complete man, I guess. So yeah, that was an ad. It was shot by this company called White Light, who were the big daddies of ad filmmaking at that time. It
Okay.
was a beautifully made film. So even if you see it today, it doesn't look dated in that sense.
Yeah.
um, you're talking about what ads that I worked on. There's something that I worked on which I recently just, I think yesterday I put on LinkedIn, and it got a very good response. It was a print ad that I had worked on. It was for adoption, and it was something that I'd worked on for an NGO called IAPA, which dealt with adoption, and
Hmm.
I think the attitudes toward adoption have changed a lot today. Where
Yeah.
but at that time, it, people were not open to adoption, and if they did adopt, they would actually try to keep it a secret and things like that. So the brief was to create a positive attitude towards adoption, and we created this print campaign which still sort of gets forwarded by people, and it shows it's a child carrying a parent, but the parent is like a baby, a small version of the parent in his or her lap. And the line below says, adopt, you will get far more, you will receive far more than you can ever give. And so
That's
yes,
beautiful.
and that was many years ago. And because I think World Adoption we Day passed just a few days ago, I realized that, and I said, let me put this old ad on LinkedIn, and it just got such a huge and such a warm response. It was really heartening. So yeah, that's one of the things that I worked on, which I'm very proud of. So, and also I had a wonderful experience some years ago, where there was somebody who got in touch with me and said, I'd like to come and meet you. And so she came and met me, and she said that your camp. So she had an adopted child, and she said it was your campaign which inspired me to adopt.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So
That's
that was
wonderful.
that was really, really something.
Wow. I think that's amazing when I think the work you do can really touch lives in that
Yeah.
way.
Yeah. I
That's,
mean, a lot of times we are selling brands which are not necessarily great. I mean, products which are not necessarily great. But when you get to work on something like this, it really is wonderful.
yeah, no, that's special for sure. And, I think sort of, pivoting a bit, I know you wrote an article about, storytelling being at the crux of the human experience.
Yes,
And,
yes.
you know, uh, just kind of talking about that, what makes a good story for you?
There are many kinds of stories that I enjoy, so it's hard to pinpoint one particular type. But what I would say is that for me, the way it's written, the writing style, the craft is very important. It's not just the story itself, but it's the way that that writer uses words that make an impact on me. So recently, the book that I read was The Promise by South African novelist Damon Galgut.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So and that had like quite a unique style. It was in a way, he had a very terse style, but there was a certain. So one of the things that I liked in the way he wrote was like when he was reporting conversation, somebody says something and they don't mean it. They mean something completely different, or with their true feelings about. So he just he would write what the person said, and then in brackets what the person actually felt about it. So that subtext, but it was so wonderful. And the other thing was that different parts of the book were written from the points of view of different characters in the book. So you really got to see the inner landscape of a lot of the characters in a more intimate way because of the way that he did it. So that was a book that I really loved. Another one was there's a book called Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. I don't know if you've read it.
No, I
So
have not.
this is a, I mean, in terms of the way it's written, this is the most one of it's an exquisitely written book. So just for that, you can read it. Uh, and it's got a fascinating subject. So the book is called Hamnet, Hamnet, and it's actually about uh, the main character in this book is Anne Hathaway, Shakespeare's wife, and it's
Okay.
about their family life. And they actually had a son called Hamnet who died in the plague. So and in some ways, Shakespeare wrote the play Hamlet
I
in memory of
see.
his son. It's a beautiful and it's a beautiful story, and I think it also has some amount of magic, uh, realism in it, and it's just wonderful. And the way it actually, because this child dies of plague, and the way it traces where the disease started and how it reached this child is also, that itself was something quite extraordinary. So you asked me what makes a story good for you, and I just told you two examples of books that I like. But yeah, so I think many different kinds of stories that I love, but it's the way that they're written that really gets to me.
Yeah.
as much as the content. And sometimes not, sometimes the content can not be so big. I mean, it's there, but it's just the way that it's written that makes it shine.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I really like those two book recommendations you gave. I have heard of The Promise. I've not read it, but I will definitely check it out. And Hamnet for sure. Um, but yeah, I mean, kind of moving back to advertising and your 30 years there. You recently did, retire, and you said you wanted to kind of give more time to the English Nut and a book you're working on.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think the first thing is, how does retired life feel now? I guess in a way, now that it's not the same role in a way.
Yeah. So, I was quite apprehensive about it before it happened, because it was, I was literally stepping into the unknown. And after having, working and going to an office, I mean, though, of course, during the pandemic, we also did a lot of work from home. But other than that, one was always in the midst of, an office and so many people. And that itself was a lifestyle,
Yeah.
So and when you're in advertising, then you're all there's a lot of socializing that you do, and it's all around work, which is also the negative part of it, because I suddenly realized that almost all my friends are also my colleagues.
Oh,
So
okay.
when I when I get out, and I know how busy, and so the socializing would half the time be impromptu, like, you work till 9:30 at night, and then you went for a drink. So then I said, will I actually get to meet any of these people who are my friends? So I was, things like that which I was worried about. And also, like, how do I structure my day?
Yeah.
You know? But what happened was that, I mean, I think the main thing was that I have stuff. I'm working on things, like I'm working. English Nut, of course, was there and continues to be there. And there's the book based on the English Nut, which I'm writing, which I'm actually way behind schedule on. So that's something that I'm trying to finish. And 2 weeks into my retirement, I had to do this I interviewed Piyush Pandey. It was a chat, or a fireside chat, as it's called. So, and I had not read his book, so I quickly read his book. His second, I read his first book. I read his second book in preparation for, that. So the first 2 weeks, I kind of occupied myself with that, and then did the fireside chat, and then I was invited to do a TEDx talk,
Oh,
uh,
wow. Okay.
by this college in Coimbatore, and that I really prepared for, because first of all, I mean, the way that I mean, this was my first brush with TED or TEDx, except as a viewer. But you first have to send the your just your speech or your talk for approval, and
Okay.
so the institution kind of, they gave me the approval, of course. But then in advertising, we do a lot of presentations which are show and tell. You have slides, and you have, you're showing ads, and or whatever, your strategy slides, and you're talking about that. So that's a huge crutch which you have. So you don't actually just do a talk where there's nothing between, it's just you and your audience, right? So I was actually quite terrified by the prospect, and I kept thinking that, what if I blank out? Of course, they had this, like a monitor, when they said, uh, you can put your notes there. So I just made a one pager with the first sentence of every section in my speech. So at least, I'll be. But it doesn't really, and they placed it sort of below the stage. So if you actually blanked out, you would have to look down, and it would have completely broken the flow. And of course, when I was doing my last rehearsals, I kept on blanking out. But thankfully, when I went up on stage to do it, I was able to do the whole thing smoothly. And it was very funny, because when I finished it and I came back and sat down with in the row where all the other speakers was, one of them said, "Wow, that was so spontaneous." So I said that was anything but spontaneous, because I've rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed. So maybe that's why I
It
could.
seemed it was so effortless.
It sounded spontaneous. So
Yeah, but clearly then retired life is not stopping you because
Yeah,
like
yeah. So I completely forgot the question that you'd asked. Yeah, so there's that, and then so that was on Saturday. My TED talk was on Saturday.
oh
Then I
wow,
was
okay.
preparing today for your uh, podcast, and then I've been asked to anchor. So there's a marketing and advertising conference coming up, and I've been asked to anchor the creative part of it. So I'm going to have to start preparing for. So I what I've realized is that as long as that you have meaningful work to do, so then it's fine. I don't want to get back into that 9 to 5 grind, but I'm glad that I have interesting things to do, and I also want to act. And by the way, I did my first acting gig also a week
Oh
ago.
wow.
Yeah, so as in I was in a TV commercial which one of my ex colleagues, who's a very talented director called Ryan Mendonça. So he was directing an ad, and he thought I was the perfect fit for a particular character. So he called me up and said, "Shumo, would you like to do this?" I said, "Yeah, this is what I've been wanting to do." So yes, so that of course I had to, you nowadays you just videotape your audition at home and you send it. That's the way it works,
Okay.
because it has to be approved by the agency, then by the client, and I've done it from the other side, so I know. But anyway, because I was the director's choice for that particular part, I got it. And the agency and the client agreed with the director. So anyway, so it was really fun to be back on a shooting floor. And I mean, of course, it's a small part anyway. An ad is just 30 seconds long, and within that is just, I'm one of the 4 or 5 characters in that ad. But it was fun, and it was a beginning for me of something that I want to pursue.
That's amazing. No, but it's so amazing to just hear you, talk about kind of just pursuing so many different things and you're still like going at it, which I think is incredible. Um, and speaking about acting, you know, I remember when the English Not videos came out and I would watch your content and I would I'd have this feeling that I have seen you somewhere before. And I realized that I've seen you in Piku in that one scene. And and that was just like I was like, oh my god, it's the same guy. So how did acting happen for you, and what are you looking forward to in that space? What are you looking at working at? Is it theater? Is it screen? Like, what is it?
So going back to how it started, when I moved, I first joined advertising in Calcutta, and then I moved to Bombay. And I had, like in Calcutta, I had been approached once or twice to do sort of really small modeling things. But so when I moved to Bombay, I decided that I'm going to get my portfolio made. And
Okay.
you'll never guess who shot my portfolio. Uh,
Should I
you
guess?
no you I don't think you'll be able to. But it's a person who's known as a very famous actor today, Boman Irani. So he
Oh
used to be a
wow.
photographer in his erstwhile life. So he was a photographer, and he used to shoot people's portfolios. So he shot my. So I can say that my modeling portfolio was shot by Boman Irani. So I with that portfolio, I started getting ads right away. In fact, and then I was also approached to do a play called Barefoot in Mumbai, which
Okay.
was based on Barefoot in the Park.
Okay.
And So I did that, and I was also approached to do a film called Chaar Adhyay, which is based on a novella by Rabindranath Tagore. And the director, his name is Kumar Shahani. Very art house kind of film. So Kumar Shahani was looking for somebody for this role, and he had actually gone to Kolkata to look for people, and he met somebody who said, I know this guy who I think fits the bill, and but he's in Bombay. So and Kumar Shani was based in Bombay. So after he came back, so he actually first called me and he spoke to me on the phone, and then we met and he cast me. So yeah, as I did the play, I did this film, and then I was also at that time I did a cameo in a film by Sudhir Mishra called Is Raat Ki Subah Nahi.
Okay.
So yeah, So yeah, and in fact, at that point, I think that if I decided that I would leave advertising and get into acting, it would have probably become a full time thing for me. But somehow or the other, I just decided that I'll do it as something on the side. It'll be a side hustle, and advertising will be my main thing. So then after that, I did. I played the Buddha in a play on the life of Buddha, which toured the U.S. and Singapore and India. So I did things on and off like that, but I couldn't devote a whole lot of time to it. And then Piku came. So the writer of Piku is Juhi Chaturvedi,
Yeah.
who used to be my colleague. So
Okay.
she called me up first and said, "Shwanto, would you do a cameo for us?" I said, "Sure." So she said, then Shujit Sarkar, the director, is also a friend because I've done many ad films with him.
Okay.
So he called me and said, "Shumato, do this." I said, "Okay, I would love to do it." And yeah, so that's how that happened. And of all the things I've done, that's the one thing that gets me most recognized, because also that scene became a meme.
Yeah.
That scene has been forwarded so many, and it keeps coming up every now and then. So I think because of that, people recognize me from. Uh, and also on Netflix, for the longest time, the Netflix promo was that scene.
Oh wow, really?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yes. And it's very funny. Netflix has this thing of serving different people different things. So I thought when I saw it that I'm probably being shown this because it's figured out it's me. So then I had friends telling me, "Hey, we saw you on the Netflix promo." So I said, "Okay, no, that's the standard one."
So now you're famous world over.
Yeah, right. So, so
No.
anyway, I hope more films and plays. I mean, I think that require actually, because that theater. What happens is that this rehearsal period is very long, and you have to spend. So currently, I'm thinking more in terms of film, because if it's, and also in a way, I mean, I'm not saying the film is easier, but there is a concept of a retake in a film, which
Okay.
I always find reassuring versus theater, where you have you can't mess up. It's like the TED talk, where you have to be perfect. So I mean, I've really enjoyed doing theater as well. Actually, I did this Agatha Christie's Mousetrap.
Mousetrap. Okay.
Yeah, and I played this character called Paravicini, who is this
Oh,
you know
okay.
somewhat over the top Italian
Yeah.
character. So I really enjoyed doing that as well, and a couple of other plays that I've done. So yeah, I'm completely open. I not only open, I really want to do a lot more acting. So I hope that I'm going to get the roles.
Yeah, let's just manifest that into the universe
Yes.
right now. As I always say on this show for all my guests, manifest whatever you want on this show. You'll never know, what might just come your way.
Super.
But yeah, kind of, but just looking then at your career trajectory, and before going into the English nut, I surely want to ask this is, you've had such an unconventional career trajectory, as we've kind of seen and discussed right now. Have you ever faced any kind of misconceptions over your choices on what you've done till now or what you do?
Well, I have to tell you this story, which I just remembered it, and I don't think I've related it to anybody before this. But when I was applying to Ogilvy in Calcutta,
Hmm.
I was interviewed by a senior executive, a very senior person in the agency, and so he wanted to know about my educational qualifications. So I started by saying that I studied mathematics and economics at the bachelor's level. So then he asked me if I managed to graduate. So I
Wow.
said, I said yes, I said I did, and then I went on to do a master's degree in mathematics. So he said, "And you dropped out of the course?" So I said, "No, I didn't drop out of the course. I finished it. Not only that, I completed it and I enrolled for an MBA." Then he said, "So you must have left your MBA halfway through, right?" I said, "No, I got the degree." So he couldn't believe that someone who had got all these degrees was applying for a job in the creative department, which didn't require any of these qualifications.
Wow.
So it was really it was a little weird at that time, but in retrospect, it's so hilarious that you're talking about your degrees one after the other, and you're being So you dropped out of it. Oh, so you didn't finish it because the person just could not believe that you had finished all these degrees and then you were applying for something which just didn't require any of them.
Yeah. Oh my
So
God,
I
that's
think
crazy.
so that yeah, so that to me is an example of people not quite taking my sort of unexpected or unusual career choice given my educational background the right way.
Yeah. But have you ever, then I'm just curious, did you ever face like any kind of, I don't know, assumptions of, or the like, I guess, even from say family or friends in terms of what you were doing?
Yeah, so I have had a lot of. Thankfully, my parents were okay with it, but I've had a lot of relatives saying that same thing after studying in Bengali. They would say after studying so much, you've gone into advertising. So it was. So that was that was a typical reaction that I got at
Yeah.
that time.
Yeah. I think it's a universal reaction at this
Yeah,
point.
like you'd after doing finance, you've got into
To
publishing.
publishing, yeah,
Well,
yeah.
I think
That's
publishing sounds far more respectable, at least in the kind of world that with the Bengali families who are into academics and they're into books. So publishing
yeah.
is still something very worthy. But
Yeah.
advertising, I hope my advertising friends are not listening to this.
No, no. I mean, you're a storyteller, so I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
that's one way of looking at it.
That's
But yes,
that's
of course, the English nut. I really want to know how was that, idea born, and how did you kind of decide to start this? What made you decide to start this, and what has your journey been like with it till now?
So, I told you that, at a very young age, I was suddenly thrown into this English environment and I was able to thrive in that, thankfully. So, I've always had this fondness for the English language. And like even in the agency in Ogilvy and 82.5, which is also part of the Ogilvy group, but my colleagues always came to me for anything related to English.
Hmm.
So, and one of my colleagues, VR Rajesh, who's also a close friend, he said you should do a blog, an English blog. And so I started writing these sort of posts about English in on Facebook, on my personal Facebook page. But when I was doing that, I thought that I want to reach a bigger audience, and b that that's the time when I started this about 4 years ago. That was when everybody was saying video is the thing.
Hmm.
So I said that I've got to start doing videos, and so I launched the English Nut, and I promised myself that for 1 year, come what may, I would upload one video a week.
Okay.
And yeah, and if after a year I saw that the thing is not working out, then maybe I'll give up. But I'm going to give it everything I have for 1 year. So for 1 year, and it's not easy to write to script and
Yeah.
research script and shoot
Yeah.
uh, a video every week.
Yeah.
But I did that, and so I got through that 1 year, and I felt that it made the English Nut made a niche for itself, and it's now almost 4 years. So I've got like 200 odd videos on my YouTube channel. So I must have done something right, I guess. But yeah. And the other thing is that, but the what is amazing is that so many things have happened in the world during this period. I mean, the pandemic and lockdown being the most significant thing. Till the lockdown happened, I used to, because I was in an ad agency and I had colleagues who could shoot and direct and all that. So I would write the scripts and then I would find somebody to shoot it for me. And then I'd also do these little skits and all that because I had a director. And then what happened? Then suddenly lockdown, and I'm technologically challenged. So I said, now what do I do? I don't even know how to shoot a video on my phone. And then I stayed awake one whole night saying, like, either have to shut this thing down or I have to figure out how to shoot. So I remember the first video that I shot was on the word quarantine.
Oh.
Yeah. So, and it and I remember it was apt because the lockdown was starting, and I remember that I didn't know I didn't have a tripod or anything, so I took a pile of books and then I put my laptop on that and I used the and I balanced the phone against my laptop screen so that I could use I could angle the laptop screen to angle my phone properly so that I got the right frame.
Oh,
And
wow.
because I shot the video and it was very grainy, but one thing is that on these kinds of video, when you do stuff on social media, people are not so fussed about the quality. It's more about the content. So I managed to get by with the grainy footage, and then from there I slowly learned how to use a tripod, how to use lights. And so I mean, that necessity was the mother of learning in the lockdown for me.
Yeah. But how did you come up with the name, the English Nut?
Hmm. I don't know actually. I mean, I was just thinking what I sort of thought that uh, English is nuts and I'm nuts about English, so I'm the English nut. That's the way I kind of came
Oh,
up with
wow.
the name. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. But then what have your favorite videos been you've done on the English Nut? Like which words or series or phrases?
It's really hard for me to say, but I think that uh, so initially I was talking about doing these skits, right? So for example, there was this whole there were two videos that I did with there was me playing a double role of both a patient and a doctor, and
Okay.
and basically taking all these words related to disease and medicine which are typically mispronounced in India, and then making a really funny skit out of that. So there were two of those videos which are among my favorites. There was another series that I did where I played a waiter and a double role of a waiter and a diner at a restaurant. It was one of
Okay.
my earliest videos. Uh, and the waiter was mispronouncing the name of food items on the menu. Uh, so that was also a lot of fun. But yeah, unfortunately now I'm not doing videos like that because uh, though the lockdown is now over, but still, given my I'm busy doing my book and so many other things, I just have time to do a video which is just a straight on, you know, talking head kind of a thing.
Yeah. But I
But
think
maybe
I really do enjoy the videos where you come as the Sardarji.
yes, those as well. I forgot to mention that. Yeah, so I shot a whole lot of them together, but I release one every few weeks or so. Yeah, that was also a lot of fun. Yeah, and a couple of my Sardar friends said that I got the look absolutely right.
Okay, wow. Okay. Because I thought
Sardar.
those videos were just like
Yeah.
they're so entertaining and they're so educational. And I'm like, yes, this is edutainment at its finest right here. But where do you then kind of see the English Nut going? Because I'm assuming this kind of started mostly as a passion project, and now you're even like coming out with a book on it. What can you tell us about that? And where do you see the English Nut going?
So I mean, I obviously English nut has is something that's close to my heart, and I think it's really given me an identity. I mean, my identity was primarily as being this advertising man, and this gave me a whole other identity, which I'm really happy about, and I want to keep doing it. And the other thing that I always told myself, that what I would do in the English Nut was not, I didn't try to be too scientific about, oh, I have to reach this target audience and therefore I should do videos like this. I wanted every video that I did, it had to be something that appealed to me. If it had to be a subject that appealed to me, and and I want to continue to do that. I don't know, so far I've just, and I've got a lot of people approaching me to do sort of endorsements and things like that, but they were not really worthwhile. And I don't want to do it unless it's something that's really worthwhile, because I'm quite happy to continue doing things the way that I'm doing. Of course, if some opportunity comes along, I'm not going to say no to it, but I mean, that's not my primary focus.
No, no, and
And
that's
the
fair.
book, and the book is, I don't want to talk too much about it because it's,
Fair.
I want to finish writing it first and get it published before I start
Fair.
talking about it. And hopefully the publishers are not going to get fed up with me and pull the plug before I finish it.
Uh, looks like I'll have to invite you back on this show, Shumanto, to talk about the book when it's out.
Yes, yes, yes. Please do that.
Yes, but no, it's really cool to see you kind of working on so many different things and really, I think, thriving and living your best life in a way. More power to you for that. So we're kind of coming to the end, but before coming to our last two questions, I do want to ask you one more thing, which is, what have been some of your favorite stories in terms of, say, books or films or just content you've consumed that's maybe kind of impacted you either while growing up or just generally in life? Like, what are some of your favorite stories?
So I'll uh, so as a child, I think I had two favorite films. One of them was The Sound of Music.
Oh, I love that. Oh my god,
Yeah,
yeah.
I think it's a favorite of a lot of people. And the other one is a Bengali film by Satyajit Ray called Gupi Gain Bagha Bain, which, and like The Sound of Music, this too is a musical. So I also back in the day had the records of The Sound of Music and Gupi Gain Bagha Bain. So I would play them and I would sing along. So yeah, and of course I watched the movies over and over again. And even as an adult, I've watched both the movies. If you haven't seen Guppy Gain, you should see it because I think it's one of the most beautiful children's films made in India ever. So
Okay.
yeah,
Oh wow. No, I'll definitely check it out. I have read a collection of poems by Sukumar, Satyajit Ray's father.
yeah, yeah,
I don't know the Bengali name, but in English it's called Nonsense Rhymes, which
yeah,
is a,
yeah. Abol Tabol. So
yes, Abol
yeah,
Tabol.
so I actually for one of my English Nut episodes, I translated one of those poems into English, and
Oh, okay,
yeah.
so we're now finally coming to the end of this interview, and we always end with these last two questions. So the first one is, what are your creative aspirations, or anything actually? What are your aspirations in general? What are you looking forward to in the near or even distant future?
So I've kind of covered these things already in bits and pieces. I'm in the process of completing a book based on the English Nut, uh, which I'm really behind on and hope to finish soon. And I've mentioned that I want to act, and I've made a start on that. And I'm open to exploring anything interesting where my writing skills could come into play. And I think creativity in general, I wouldn't restrict it only to writing. Uh, I mean, I think that for me, my goal always has been to live my life creatively, to
Hmm.
explore creativity in all its different dimensions. So there may be a dimension that I've not explored yet, which I would get a chance to explore now. I mean, I know I love to do. I mean, I'm an amateur photographer and I love to take pictures. And I was really happy because I published uh, a picture essay, a photo essay in a magazine based on a trip that I'd taken, a horse riding trip that I'd taken in Denmark.
Oh wow.
And yeah, so they said that we'd love to feature your photograph. So that was, so I was suddenly a published photographer also. So like that, I don't know what's next, but definitely, I think what really keeps me going and what keeps me charged is to have to be able to explore creativity and to do different creative things, and that's what really keeps me inspired and keeps me from going stale, I think.
No, that's
Yeah.
that's amazing, and I'm looking forward, to kind of seeing what you come up with next, as you always do on social media. It's always such a pleasure and treat to kind of see the different things you're working on. So more power to you on that.
Thank you so
And
much.
and finally, the last question: what is a piece of advice or learning you'd like to share with people? This can be creative, professional, personal, just something you've experienced and learned yourself and wish more people were aware
Yeah.
of.
So, I think the important element in my working life has been relationships with people. How
Hmm.
you treat others is so important. And for me, the people I worked with mattered as much or more than the actual work we were doing.
Hmm.
And in this respect, I was different from some of the other ambitious people that I've come across who focus solely on the work and they see the people only as a means to an end. I've never been able to look at life like that. So my
Hmm.
advice to everybody is to see people in human terms and simply put, be good to them. So it seems like a very mundane piece of advice, but I really believe in this, and I think that one can't say it enough. So I think that we should all learn to treat the people around us better.
Yeah. No, I think it's a very true piece of advice. And I think it is something everyone tends to forget in a way, through life. I guess. And so yeah, it is definitely an important piece of advice for sure.
Because I think if you're a part of a team, if you're leading a team, like I've
Yeah.
been leading teams forever, I mean, I think loyalty is so important, and
Hmm.
loyalty works both ways.
True.
While you expect loyalty from them,
Yeah.
and you have to be loyal to them as well. So
For
that's the
sure.
being to them part of it. So that the
Yeah.
loyalty works both ways.
Definitely. And on that wonderful note, we have now come to the end of this interview. Thank you so much for being here, Sumanto. It was an absolute pleasure talking to you. I loved hearing your story and, just all the anecdotes you shared and experiences you spoke about. I hope you had fun.
Yes, Sangeeta, it was great talking to you. I think that you're a kindred spirit because you're the finance person who went into publishing. I'm the math and economics and business person who went into the creative department in an ad agency. So I think that's why we hit it off so well, and it was really enjoyable talking to you. Thank you so much for having me on this show.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you.
So that was my conversation with Sumanto Chattopadhyay. I really enjoyed recording this, and it was so cool to hear about different anecdotes and experiences from his life. Closing this episode with an excerpt from a short story written and narrated by Sumanto. I hope you enjoyed the show, and I'll see you next week with a new guest and a new chronicle to share. Talk soon!
I'm going to read an excerpt from Mount Uma, a short story I wrote. The giraffe beamed. She had been grazing on an acacia tree by the side of the road. When Maxine stopped the car to get a good look at her, she reciprocated her curiosity. The giraffe stuck her head through the window and smiled at her. Maxine suddenly felt like a child and wanted to squeal with joy, excitement, and just a smidgen of glorious fear. The ossicones of the giraffe brushed Maxine's shoulder as the gentle creature straightened out to her full height and went back to eating acacia twigs. Maxine drove on through the dusty savannah, imagining that she was in an old photograph. The ubiquitous dry tall grass and the smattering of leafless baobab trees that secretly hoarded water in their giant trunks were all in shades of pale sepia. Maxine never stopped marveling at how the seemingly dead sentinels of the East African savanna, the baobabs, revealed their inner life with an overnight growth of greenery when there was even the lightest shower of rain. Lately, however, there had been no precipitation. Well before Maxine caught the first glimpse of Mount Uma, she sensed it. A cool shadow seemed to fall on her. She had read that Uma used to be taller than Mount Jaro, its neighbor, but the volcanic mountain had blown its top off. Perhaps a phantom of its earlier stature remained. Near Uma, the grassland gave way to forest. She found a clearing in the trees and parked her Peugeot in it. Then she hitched her backpack onto her shoulder and began the trek. The path entered dense forest, some of the lushest in East Africa. It passed through an arch, a natural gateway to the Mount Uma trail. The arch was formed by two olive trees trapped permanently in the tight embrace of a ficus. Maxine came across a male giraffe. She was sure that he was the mate of the one she had met earlier, On her drive, she looked up and told the giraffe that his partner was waiting for him downhill. The giraffe looked a bit startled and loped away. His gait made Maxine think of slow motion film. It started to get colder as she gained altitude and the sun descended to the horizon. The wind picked up and she imagined she heard singing in a soothing, whispery male voice. Malaika, nakupenda malaika. Angel, I love you, angel. It was the voice of Julius. Oh, Julius, why are you not here beside me? Why Geneva? Did you have to study a complicated subject? Why couldn't you specialize in something that was offered in the medical school in nearby Rubinia? Maxine remembered the freshman year college cultural program where he sang this song. His voice had transfixed her. She had noticed him before, a tall and gentle young man, but that day the voice floated down from the stage and wrapped her in its embrace. The relationship between a white girl and a black boy had been met with skepticism on campus, but after a while people realized that the bond went beyond racial differences. Maxine had a trusting soul, and Julius nurtured it in the nest of his quiet caring. Malaika nakupenda malaika, nami nifanyeje kijana mwenzio. Angel, I love you, angel, but I, your young friend, what should I do?